Hello, welcome to My Life in Pixels. It's Frankie Ward here, as always. No guest presenters yet on this podcast. Thank you so much for downloading this episode. This one is all about Sam Tech Girl Wright. She is a South African host who started out with her own tech blog, and you can actually still read that. She's even got a team of writers working on it now. And I first found out about Sam when I joined my agency Code Red, which Sam was already a member of. So we were kind of discovered in the same way by Paul, aka Red Eye, and we talk a little bit about Sam's move into hosting later in this episode. Now, Sam is a girl after my own heart because she hosted Contenders EU for Overwatch, and I do love Overwatch. I got to do the World Cup last year, so that was definitely one of my highlights of last year, getting to actually talk about Overwatch and be paid to do it. It's kind of the dream, really, so I was super lucky to do that, and I was really interested to hear what Sam's experiences were of living in Kiev and working on that league. We also talk a lot about South Africa because that's where Sam still calls home, and she spends a lot of time travelling around the world to do events, most recently Splatoon 2 in Paris, at the time of recording anyway. So it was good to find out her take on the eSports industry, not just around the world, but locally at home in South Africa too. So I'm going to let her tell you all about it right now, rather than me whittering on as usual. And we start by talking about how we have never actually met each other in person.
I know it's kind of weird because I feel like I know you quite well, and we've obviously we've chatted, but it is weird that we've actually never met face to face or in real life.
What is up with that? I wish we could have met maybe at BlizzCon or something like that. We need to find the right moment, don't we?
We do. I need to come to the UK on holiday. I think that's probably, and when you're not working, and then we can have an actual sit down in an awkward coffee shop and feel weird because we've spoken so long, but we've never actually seen each other face to face.
I would love that so much. If you are ever in London, please let me know, Sam. But let me ask about how you got started, because I remember, I think the first thing I saw of you was maybe you hosting some CS over in South Africa.
Yes. So funny enough, I mean, from an esports point of view, what's weird is I never really wanted to get into hosting or casting or anything like that. Originally what had happened was I was working quite a corporate job in marketing, which I hated, funny enough. And to just keep myself entertained, I started a blog, which was a tech blog originally. But my brother and I had been playing games since we were little. We'd grown up playing games, and he had moved into Dota and he was competing. And in South Africa, we're a good few years behind the rest of the world when it comes to esports. So when I say competing, they were playing in basements for keyboards, and they were actually doing that. And I always used to go and watch him and support. And obviously his team was always around at our house landing. So I grew up with a bunch of these kids. And then we started seeing some excitement in esports, but still not enough. So I just kind of was well, I've got this blog. I've got a bit of an audience. I'm going to start telling them about esports in South Africa, and hopefully it'll get them some attention. And because I was just at those events making these really bad videos and writing these cringy articles, one day someone was like, hey, actually, we need someone to stand up here and interview players. Can you do it? And I was like, yeah, sure. Anything to try and make this better and get people to watch. And that was literally how I fell into it. And then all of a sudden I was hosting CS because I love CS. And next thing I had an agent and was getting jobs. So it wasn't actually a planned thing at all.
And was that agent Paul?
That was Paul. So what happened was, funny story. So South Africa was kind of quite far behind everyone. And then we did this, one of the tournament organizers did this big event where they threw a 6-figure prize pool at it. And it was going to be this huge thing. And they did this giant launch where they did a launch to announce the tournament where they flew Red Eye, Paul, out. And I'll never forget, he was on stage in a giant egg, and this egg opened and he walked out. And I remember the egg. I'll never forget the egg and all the fireworks. And then he walked out, announced that this tournament was happening at the end of the year. And then that was it. So they'd flown him all the way to do that, which I thought was a bit odd, but whatever. He came out of the egg. And it was funny enough at that announcement where I saw a lot of friends of my brother and obviously guys that I'd grown up with. They were running around so excited because they've been playing games for years, and this has always just been a hobby. And they were like, this is it, Sam. It's blowing up. We're going to be able to make these our careers. This is finally, we're going to be taken seriously. And I suppose I felt a bit bad because I was watching them run around at this event with the free food and the drinks and Red Eye coming out of the egg. And I thought, this isn't going to be what you think it is. In 2 days' time, the media would have forgotten about this, and you'll go back to to not really having this blow up the way you want, which was when I started doing far more content. At the end of that year, they flew Paul out again for this big event. It was Rage. It was called the Masters Final for the 6-figure prize pool. And at that stage, I'd been doing like some interviews and stuff behind the scenes with players, and they said, do you want to co-host? And obviously I was like, oh, of course I want to co-host with Red Eye. I'm way out of my league, not qualified to do this, but I'm so there. And I got to work with him for the weekend. And the whole time he kept saying to me, like, if you took this a bit more seriously, if you did X, Y, Z, and I obviously listened and took on what he said, but at no time did I take it seriously in the sense that I thought this was a future career. And it was only a couple of months later I'd flown to the UK for a work for like a work function, and he happened to be there for the eSports Awards. So he said, why don't we go for coffee? We went for coffee in this weird little sort of restaurant, and he said to me, if you take this seriously and if you sit down and if you do X, Y, Z, I can help you and you can be good. You just need to put in the work. And at that point, I was like, actually, I might just listen to this guy and take him seriously, which I did. And then it worked out. So, yay.
How long ago was that?
I think it was like 3 years ago. Must have been, 3 years ago, I think. Beginning of 2017? End of 2016, thereabouts, yeah.
Yeah, so we kind of started around the same time, I guess. I mean, you were definitely on camera before I was. I guess I started at Twitch like July 2016. So in terms of making gaming the full-time thing, I guess we started at the same time. I nearly died, though, when you just mentioned about Paul and the egg. I can't believe I held it together. I cannot wait to ask him about that. In fact, I might go in the Code Red Discord after this and be like, so Paul, the egg?
The best part is I'm pretty sure I can find footage of it for you. So
oh my God,
I'm
please,
gonna go.
Please.
I will definitely find footage of the giant egg opening. It was quite strange, but it was also fun. Also, no one knew that Red Eye was in the egg. So I mean, there's that. That was pretty exciting.
Tap. It's so Spinal Tap. I cannot get over that. That's brilliant. So you sign up with Code Red, our agency, and then what happens? Did you start to look at going full-time straight away, or did you still balance the day job?
So I'd left the day job before when I went over to the UK and I'd met with Paul. I was in the process of leaving my day job. I just really wasn't happy. I obviously had the blog, so I was doing that, which was making me a little bit of money. And then I was also sort of working with a couple of brands on a consulting point of view. So like I had like little bits and pieces of jobs that I was doing, which was enough to kind of sustain me. But I was just so unhappy in the day job that I left. And again, even when I chatted to Paul, because I came from marketing and advertising, and before that I'd worked in radio, so I kind of had an idea of how entertainment works, for want of a better term. So I never really saw like esports work as a permanent job, just because I know how up and down it can be. So even when I spoke to him, I was like, I'll take this seriously, but I'm going to keep this other stuff going on the side to kind of keep me going. And after speaking to him, I then did some work. I used to bug him so much. I sent him so many videos of things to get feedback, and bless him, he was always really sweet and like helped me out where he could. And then I just started getting some work locally in South Africa, like small bit jobs that I could do, and put together the cringiest showreel I think I've ever seen. I bought all the lighting effects and like added it to the mix, and then I convinced my friend G-Max to edit it, so he added even more lighting and bling, and we made this like cheesy showreel, which I then gave to Code Red and they shipped it off. I don't know how, but I then got a gig at Gamescom that year. I don't know how they did it with that showreel. I'm pretty sure that they didn't use it.
What was the Gamescom job?
So Gamescom was 2. There was a CSGO event that was happening on the ESL stage, which was basically fans could, I think it was PaySafeCard had done this thing where fans could enter and then they could come and play with their heroes in a team. And my job was to host that, and then to obviously do interviews with these players and basically make them feel like the superstars. That was in the morning, and then in the afternoon, Dragon Ball FighterZ was about to launch, so they had done an invite-only tournament for guys who wanted to play that game. So it was more fighting game, community-orientated. Hosting again, lots of interviews. It was a bit of death by fire because it was my first like international gig, so I was obviously super stressed. South Africans, other than Quickshot, don't really end up overseas on camera, so I was very, very nervous about that. And then I had to interview, and I'm sure you know how this goes, but you have to interview a bunch of people who don't speak English as their first language. And on top of that, I have this hardcore South African accent. So it was quite scary, but we got through it. And that was basically my first time going overseas for esports.
what is the scene like in South Africa? Because I'm guessing there's quite a big contrast, really, to, say, the European scene.
It's so different, and I think it's when you've seen both sides, it gets worse because you see the differences even more. The South African scene is tiny, so it's a very, very small scene. Obviously, because of where we're located, we are at the bottom of Africa. We can't play European teams, we can't play American teams. We're really stuck. So if we get South African servers, we can't improve because only the small player base can play each other. If we try to play on international servers, we have terrible ping. So it's a very isolated community, and that's tough. On top of that, because it is so small, a lot of the time you don't see big game developers come into South Africa. They have distributors here, the big brands as well. They're not necessarily in South Africa. You can buy them, but they're handled by a distributor. So that affects budgets as well. We also have a connection issue, so data and getting on the internet is quite expensive here. So streams aren't as supported as what you see in Europe. So all of that combined causes a bit of a problem because there isn't really the money coming into the local scene. So a lot of what you see in South Africa is just people doing stuff because much like how I started, where I'm like, I'm just going to make content because no one else is. There's a lot of guys who run tournaments. They're not making any money. They're just doing it to try and have tournaments. Then we had this like weird influx of money like 2-3 years ago where suddenly everyone and their mom was just like throwing cash at a scene that wasn't ready for it, I think. So they'd seen what was happening overseas. They were like, okay, cool. We also want to fill stadiums. We also want lots of money, and did this. And it really struggled to get a return because people weren't really aware of what esports was. They didn't quite understand. And this very small community was trying to push it out there. Because of that influx, we've now seen like a lack of money almost. So you've got all these guys who, especially the players, and this really bugs me, is there was a lot of South African players who quit their day jobs and did go full time because the money was suddenly good enough that they could, and now all that money's gone. And they're sort of sitting there going, well, I quit my job a year ago and now I've got to go get a real job. But so we're in this like weird fluxy state, I think, for players. Saying that though, we do have some really good talent that have gone overseas and done really well. The Bravado gaming team, who's now been picked up by Denal in the States, they went over and they came second at a DreamHack. They've been living in the States, grafting. There's another Dota player called Castaway who's in Asia. So we've got these like really good players who leave, but we're still struggling locally to build up the industry to a point where it's like it's actually a sustainable place where you can say, okay, I have a job in esports. I think if you're not leaving South Africa, it's very difficult to make an income here.
And so how much of your work would you say is in South Africa and how much of it is elsewhere? I'd
say 80% is elsewhere, 20% is here. When we talk only about esports, when we talk about like, I do content creation as well on the blog and stuff where I can. So most of that is South African, but the esports stuff, I wouldn't be able to call it a career if I wasn't traveling.
And so would you rather be working exclusively in South Africa, or are you quite happy to get to travel elsewhere?
This is such a difficult question. So I love traveling and I get to see lots of amazing places, and I love working overseas because it is a bit more sort of, I suppose, further ahead than South Africa, whereas in South Africa we don't really have access to something you can get in a professional studio in Europe. I'd want to, and this has always been like the difficult one for me, because lots of people have said to me, well, why don't you move overseas, locate overseas, and like take this seriously? Not that I'm not taking it seriously now, but focus purely on this, like give up all this other side stuff that you have to do because you choose to live in South Africa and just be based overseas working. But I really love South Africa, and I didn't get into this for any other reason than I was trying to help a bunch of kids who land in my dining room growing up. So I don't know if I could ever leave here. I like working overseas, but I kind of hope that I can bring back a lot of what I learn to our local production and help build the scene. But at the moment, it does feel a little bit like I have one foot at home and then one foot elsewhere, and I can't quite decide where I want to be.
Well, I do want to talk more about your work in Kiev with Overwatch Contenders Europe. But before then, I'm really curious to find out a bit more about where you are in South Africa and what it was like there growing up. So I've only been to Port Elizabeth and to Cape Town, and I went when I was 9. I got to ride an ostrich. We went to Adu, the elephant safari park. Tried to find dung beetles, couldn't. But whereabouts in South Africa are you, Sam?
So I was born and bred in Johannesburg, which is the town that no one comes to visit, the main city, because it's basically the business city. There's nothing pretty here. No, I'm joking. It's a mining town. It was a mining town, so I was born and bred here. Cape Town's where you want to go on holiday. It's even where I go on holiday because it's absolutely beautiful there. You've got the mountain and you've got the beach and you've got the chilled vibe. Joburg is very like hustle and bustle type of city, but there's lots to do here and fun things. I'm trying to sell it now because I feel like I threw it under the bus right at the beginning there. But so I've lived here my whole life basically, and my dad is originally from the UK, so I'm very lucky I have a UK passport, which means I can travel for work as much as I do. But my mom is South African, and I had a very different life growing up. So you mentioned Contenders, and obviously I worked with a bunch of British shoutcasters, and we lived together last year. And they lived a very different life to what I did growing up because we have sunshine all year round. We're an outside culture. We're always outside. Like, we're very sports orientated. So like, it's just we go to restaurants, no one sits inside. You sit outside because it's South Africa and the weather's great. So it's like weird for me to go into a restaurant and like sit in a corner. And also obviously the size of our country, it's big. So we have lots of space. Like, space is a premium. My apartments, I have a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment that I live in. It's just considerably bigger than anything you're going to get in Europe, but I pay a fraction of what someone living in London would pay. So it's like, I actually like the way of life in South Africa is amazing. I think everyone should just move here, and then they'll have to bring all the esports tournaments here for us.
Do they do vegetarian braai?
Vegetarian braai you can
do. Is that
do.
possible?
There is vegetarian braais. You can do it with like mushrooms. I've seen people do it, and then like veggie kebabs. Also, we have like, this is again, so we're kind of always like 2 years behind, but the vegan culture's like hit South Africa hard, which is weird because you mentioned braais, so you know that's kind of our vibe, is like cooking meat on a fire outside. But now we have quite a big vegan culture. There's more vegan restaurants here than I could find in Kiev, which is, and I'm not vegan, but I like to look and see. So we have like a stack of vegan restaurants and like these weird vegan, like, I don't know what it is. You, instead of buying hamburger patties, you can buy vegan hamburger patties.
Yeah, you can get them made from like mycoprotein, which is basically a type of fungi. There's one called Satan now, which you find a lot of vegan places, which I think is probably quite similar. So mycoprotein is basically used for corn and things like that. And then I think in LA they developed the Impossible Burger, which is, I think it's made of beetroot because it bleeds.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really weird.
It was really okay. So we have something called biltong. Did you taste biltong when you were 9 years old and came here?
No, I just turned vegetarian as well, so my family was quite annoyed at me.
Okay, fair enough. So biltong, if you didn't know, is that it's dried meat, and I feel like that's a terrible way to describe it because it's delicious. But it is basically dried and cured meat, beef specifically. And people always say, "Oh, it's like beef jerky." It's nothing like beef jerky. It's delicious. Beef jerky is not. And biltong is like a huge thing here. Everyone snacks on biltong. Like, that's, if you go out, instead of chips on a table, there'll always be a bowl of biltong. And then one of our local stores made mushroom biltong.
Ooh.
Which I thought was the weirdest thing I'd ever heard of. But it looks like biltong. It doesn't taste like biltong, but it tastes pretty good, and it's made out of mushrooms. So there you go.
I love that. I love that it also allows people to not feel like they're missing out while they're kind of trying to do their bit. Because I am not anti people eating meat at all. It's more about, I guess, when I was younger, I did it to prove a point to my family, and I just didn't stop. And that was 22 years ago. But I like the idea that people go, okay, right, so we'll eat meat sometimes, but if we don't eat meat today, it's not the end of the world. Like, that's the kind of culture I'm interested in, is people being just more responsible and sustainable and all that kind of thing. But anyway, I'm digressing because we're talking about your life as opposed to what I think about vegetarianism, Sam. So what were you playing? Because you mentioned your brother discovering Dota 2, but what did you grow up playing?
So I grew up, so the first game that I remember getting like super invested in was Mortal Kombat. I loved Mortal Kombat.
At home or in an arcade machine?
No, specifically at home. So my dad had a desk. Like, this is one thing, like, I feel like my parents, my father specifically, shaped our gaming careers, but also when I look back, it was probably not great parenting because we got like access, you know, when the internet first came out. I mean, I still remember there was like this weird free website building site called GeoCities where like anyone could go build a website.
I remember that, yes.
And I remember being like 12 and him just giving me free reign to build websites on GeoCities. He was like, yeah, do whatever you want. Like, off you go. And at that stage, I was like super obsessed with horses. So like there was like this whole, it used to be called a cyber horse game. So these like different people would set up these games where you would basically like pretend that you had a horse on the internet, and then you would like, you had a stud farm and you would compete. It was really strange, but I was just building websites all the time, and we had free reign on the internet. And he also had a stack of games. So Mortal Kombat was the one that like we were always playing. And then I figured out that you could find cheats on the internet, again, all by myself, no parental supervision here. So I grabbed like a bunch of cheats just so I could do all the fatalities because they were my favorite. And then they used to have like the baby fatalities where you could turn your character into a baby. That became like my obsession. So Mortal Kombat was like the super big one that we played all the time. And then obviously moved into like Sims, because I think that game, just everyone's had a Sims moment in their life.
I love Sims.
And
I still love it. I want to play it again.
I've got it on I actually, funny enough, my player 2 purchased it for me the other day, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to play this. And then I set it up, and I think I spent like 7 hours just doing my thing, playing Sims. And then I changed PCs, and I was super upset because I lost all my families and the chaos that I'd caused. And I didn't realize how like attached I was to these weird little creatures that I'd made on the internet. So I was quite upset that they were all gone. But anyway, that's another story. But from there, we started playing also Age of Empires. So that was like those 3, Mortal Kombat, Sims.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, Age of Empires was the big one. And then I remember he got Diablo, but I think it was just a bit too much for my little mind, and it scared me a little bit. So we kind of jumped into everything. And then I think he got annoyed. My dad just got annoyed that my brother and I were on the computer all the time, and we were starting to fight. So then we just got the Sega system. So obviously that was an obsession for a while as well. And we kind of just jumped between different games. My brother then got heavily invested in Dota, but that's a game that I've kind of always struggled with. And Dota, and then funny enough, when he hit like 17, I call this the dark year, but he started playing World of Warcraft. I didn't see him for the entire year. And then one day he came out and said he wasn't playing the game ever again. And that was that.
Has he played it since? Has he stuck to that?
No, he's never played it again. It was bad.
Wow.
Like when we said that, it was bad. Like he went through. It was kind of funny because him and I were living with my mom, and he had just started university, and I think I was working at that time. He ended up. He just never went to class. He never went to varsity. He never left his room, and it became like, it was like an obsession. So he would get home from wherever he'd been, if he'd been forced to go somewhere, and then he would just stop playing, and he wouldn't stop. And then I would wake up to go to work at like 5:36 in the morning and still be playing. And him and my mom used to fight all the time. I remember her doing the whole thing where she like unplugged the router to just try to get him out of his room. And it was bad. Like there were conversations had about sending him to a psychologist because he was so obsessed, and he'd stopped playing Dota completely. He just wasn't interested. And then one day he just walked out of his room with an empty, I think he had like a glass of like cold drink. He walked out with a dirty plate and the empty glass, and he was like, I'm never playing that game again. And then he literally never played it again, and he was back to normal. So it's the dark year of his life. But it's kind of funny now when people say they play World of Warcraft, because I do have a terrible perceived notion of what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny actually, quite a lot of the PUBG talent, they're all really into World of Warcraft, so they'll actually all go on raids on the same server. It's really funny how, you know, they're PUBG and WoW obsessed, and like, because you wouldn't expect there to be crossover on those games. Actually, Machine is someone who plays a lot of World of Warcraft. Like, I can't wait for one day for Blizzard to use him on one of their shows, because they're missing out like by not using Machine. I think I never got into World of Warcraft. I played a lot of single player games because I didn't really have anyone to play multiplayer with. So unless I was watching my sister, then I was really playing on my own. Like, I played a demo of Age of Empires 2. There were only 2 levels on it, or 2 missions, and I played them over and over again, obsessively. And I never
Age of Empires was amazing. Command and Conquer as well. That's another one I remember playing a lot of. So those were like my favorite games. World of Warcraft, I actually want to play. Like, I really do want to play WoW. I'm just scared because I just always see my brother. He said to me the other day though, he was like, if you get it, if you download it and you want to play it, like, I'll play it with you. And then I was like, well, I definitely can't, because I know what happens. And now you have a girlfriend and you live in a house, and I can't ruin your life and your relationship and your good job.
You're very responsible, Sam. So what kind of genres were you drawn to then?
So I've always loved watching FPS. The problem is like I have terrible aim. So and I know this and I've tried, but I used to love watching my dad and my brother shoot stuff. So like watching my dad play Tomb Raider was like my favorite thing if he was shooting things. So I was always drawn to watching FPS. And now that I'm older, I love playing FPS. I'm just really like I'm not great at it. I know I'm not. I'm not as fast as I need to be, and sometimes my aim's off. But apparently, I've been fixing it the other day because I've started playing with my mouse sensitivity so low that it feels like I'm walking through sludge. But I'm hoping that this will help improve because I used to play with it really high because I just preferred it. But I was always drawn to watching FPS, but I always loved playing games like Age of Empires where you were building were like really fun for me, and sort of building in an entire civilization and like leveling it up. And I suppose that whole Sims aspect as well of building. But watching stuff was always FPS. And now that I've got older, like I said, playing is for me. I like going in. I like having my 15-20 minutes of just shooting things, even if I miss, and just feeling super powerful. So it's Overwatch. I've got obsessed with Apex Legends. I mean, we played PUBG and I was horrible at it, but I found PUBG really slow, whereas Apex Legends I really like because I can land where I know I can fight and I can just run in and cause chaos. And I get great joy out of running and trying to punch people to death. So that's like my new favorite thing as well. So that's like that. Now I'm more in the space of like, if it's like 15-20 minutes and I can jump in and I can just feel empowered, then I'm quite happy.
Oh, tangent. So Apex, people are calling it an esport already. What do you think of that?
No, no. I really like so I love the game. And funny enough, here in South Africa, we do a lot of stuff ourselves, and a couple of mates and we really loved it, and we were like, it'd be cool. We should run like a community tournament. So we did something that we called the community sock, so that the winning team gets a sock, and we were like, we're just going to run this and everyone's going to stream and we'll jump into their streams. It'll basically be a kill race. And we had so much fun. And it was really fun to commentate on people. And it's like, I've also been sort of playing with shoutcasting for a bit. So it was like fun to feel like I was casting, but we were commentating on people's rounds. And I really enjoyed it. But Apex as a game is beautifully made. It's absolutely phenomenal. But I don't think it's ready for esports. And I also feel like sometimes as much as I love esports and like I like watching streamers play Apex, I feel like sometimes we force stuff into what we want it to be. So for example, with Apex, we're kind of this whole thing of saying it's the next big esport when it's not really even ready for that. I feel like we're just trying to force something. We should rather just wait and let it organically become what it is that it's supposed to be and what that's supposed to look like. So I kind of feel like people will ruin my new favorite game if they try and force it into this like, oh, now it's an esport and we're going to make it an esport. Just wait. Like if there is an esports rollout or a plan, it'll come and we'll figure it out. I do think it has potential, but I think Battle Royale, and obviously working on PUBG a lot, like Battle Royale comes with its own set of challenges. That's really difficult to get into a broadcast and package in an entertaining way for the viewer. I think PUBG's done it well, but we've seen like Fortnite struggled, and I think Apex has to figure out what they're going to do and how they're going to make it look so that it doesn't look like the same thing as what PUBG is currently doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I think that Apex have been incredibly clever in learning from other games as well. Like, I think they listened to the Overwatch audience and what the Overwatch audience were looking for. And I think that they learned from Fortnite as well, and in terms of the weapon progression, like the color coding of the weapons, so that's nice and simple. And then they learned from the mechanics of Blackout in terms of that run and gun aspect to it, just pick up and play. So I think that they've been incredibly clever in the way that they've constructed that game.
I also think that everything that you said I agree with, and also I think like what's fun, so for someone like me so my aim's not that great, like I've said, and I panic when I'm in a big fight, but what's cool about Apex is when I jump onto a certain legend, like it doesn't matter if I'm not the best sniper or the best in a gunfight, because I have certain abilities that I can use that can help the team. So I kind of dig that whole vibe of there's three of us and each of you has a different role, and you can still make an impact without necessarily having to get the highest kills. I like that, and I know lots of other people that do as well. But at the same time, there's people that don't. So I feel like they've taken the best parts, they've made a really good game, and I'd be interested to see if they take it the esports way. I see lots of like MGOs setting up Apex teams already and stuff, so maybe there's something that we don't know yet. But I just also wish people would just let stuff age, figure it out, let the community decide how they want it to grow. I think that's why Dota and CS are as big as what they are is because the community kind of dictated the direction that they wanted that to grow as competitive sports. So we'll see. I mean, I still love Apex regardless, but maybe one day maybe that's the game I can compete in. I mean, that's saying a lot, but I could try, you know?
Yeah, I think that'd be wicked. I think also to have some like personality-driven tournaments for Apex where they're not chucking $100 million at it and they're just saying, let's do something for fun, let's do something for charity, as opposed to this is going to be a league and all that kind of thing. I'd love to see that in the future. But what I'm curious about is how you got into Overwatch. Were you a big fan of the game before Contenders came calling?
Funny enough, no. I mean, I wasn't a fan. I'd played it once or twice, but my mates didn't play it. And games like that, if your mates don't play, you don't tend to play. And then I'd heard about, I'd been contacted about Contenders, and then they mentioned that it was happening. And I was like, well, I should probably stop paying a bit more attention. So then I jumped in and I started playing. And I think anyone who's worked in esports knows that at the moment they say, okay, this is the game. You tend to jump in and you make it your all and you put as much effort in to learn how to play it and understand it from a player perspective. So I just played Overwatch. And I still remember, I think I started streaming it as a laugh before Contenders was even confirmed. And people used to come watch my stream and be like, wow, you're super bad at this. Like, this is horrible to watch. And then after a couple of months, they were like, oh, actually, you're quite good. Well, like, the last time I watched, this was terrible. And then I got more and more into it. And I also think then when the Contenders job came out and we were doing Contenders all the time, when you're sitting doing a desk, so when you're hosting the desk, you're much more aware of meta and how people are playing and team strategies. And you're looking at all of that so that you can find the right questions. And because you're looking at all of that, you become much more obsessed with the game and you start using that in your own play style. And then it just became a thing where, like, I'm absolutely in love with Overwatch now. I still play it at least once a week. I still try to get people to jump on and play it. I love it so much. I find it really fun. And I then started, funny enough, again, at the beginning of the year, some of my mates and I, we entered a tournament for money, which we haven't won yet. It's like a league, but we're playing in a tournament. And it was kind of funny because it was myself, a bunch of other guys that are really good, and then like 3 people who downloaded the game the night before our first official game in this competition. And we've been playing in this tournament, having the best time. And that's, I've really enjoyed as well from like a competitive element, is like once a week going in and having to compete. It's actually quite fun, and it does, like, it's added a much more exciting dynamic. So as much as I've worked in esports and I've spoken about it and I get really excited watching people play, actually competing myself has also given me like a whole new understanding of how stressful that situation is.
I can't play in a competitive environment. I'm absolutely terrible. I can do ranked with the team that I know, but I think I bottle it. I'm not as strong as you.
I'm not gonna lie, like, there's been a few times where we've played and we've been rolled hard in like the first sort of few minutes, and it's kind of it's very difficult to deal with, and you just feel really like I don't even know how to explain. There's actually no words because now I'm speechless, because I was like, I'm just thinking back to those times where we've been beaten by like in the space of 10 minutes. And then the other team is super polite about it as well. When I'm like, you shouldn't be polite, because if I was doing this on the other side, I would be giving you such a hard time. So it's quite hard and tough. But I have I think what's different is I'm not really playing with like a team. None of us are trying to take this super seriously. We wanted to have fun, and we kind of also wanted to support like the local Overwatch community, because they run these leagues and these tournaments and they put so much effort into like promoting it and supporting, and they've got these Discord channels running. So we were like, this is something cool that we can do, and like it's nice to be able to be involved and support the community and try and build it together. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if competing is, as much as I joked about Apex, I'm not 100% sure if like full-time esports players ever in my future, because those guys have balls of steel.
Yeah, and you've got a pretty good career of it doing the full-time talking about esports thing, Sam, as well. So I don't think you should feel too much pressure. Quickly, before I ask you more about Contenders, though, who are you maining? What's your role?
So I'm Marissa most of the time, but I'm changing that to Zenyatta because, one, there's someone else on my team who's just way better at Orisa, so I'm just going to give that one up. But also, I actually find Zen quite fun because I find him enjoyable from the support side, but you can also cause quite a bit of damage with him. But I really want to try out Batista because I've seen lots of videos of this new hero, so I kind of want to give him a go because I think he might suit me a bit. And I like being able to move and shoot, and then there's a support element to him. So I might actually play him tonight, funny enough, because I think he's going to be out on the main servers tonight. And then maybe I'll change. But for now, yeah, it's Orisa, Zenyatta, jumping around between the two.
I love Moira because of that aspect of being able to damage and attack. So I think I might like Batista as well. So I think I might have to jump on the server sometime soon while I have a chance. But how did you end up in Kiev with my mates Trid and Derry doing Contenders, doing the desk?
This was the weird thing. So I got a phone call. They asked me they said, was I interested? So I laughed and said yes, because I didn't think anyone was being serious. And then they asked me to do a demo, and I was working on the African qualifiers for WSG at the time. So I was in a really nice production studio. So jumped behind the Shoutcaster desk and did like some sort of demos of me on a desk. And I still remember using, because I didn't know the game that well, just like coming up with funny puns for all the heroes, but then using like CSGO, because I also was in the middle of desk hosting for CSGO. So kind of using the CSGO teams and the storylines that I wanted to work with at WSG as my kind of, I suppose, audition tape, and then just throwing in some funny Overwatch puns and sort of sent it off. And then afterwards was like, oh, I don't know how this is going to go, but I knew it looked professional. And then they phoned and they said, cool, you're in, we're going to do this thing. You're going to fly to Kiev and work here for 5 weeks. So you'll live in Kiev for 5 weeks, fly home for like a week, fly back there for a week, fly home, lots of backwards and forwards, and you're going to do 3 seasons. And then I got on a plane, and that was where I met Des and Trid, and then also Jaws and Leg Day also work on it. And then for the whole of last year, it was the 5 of us going backwards and forwards to Kiev to work in Contenders.
That's crazy. I mean, also, it feels like it's quite unusual to be asked to do an audition video.
I've normally just always supplied my show reel, and that's that. I know that the casters got asked to send casting auditions as well. I'm presuming it was just to get a feel for what it would look like, and just a sort of better example of maybe what was on offer, I'm presuming. And I felt bad because I don't think I really put enough effort into it. Like it was, I focused, because I was more focused on the job that I was working on. It was very CSGO oriented. Like I just used CSGO players and teams and things like that. But I get the impression it was just to get a feel for what it would look like if they put everyone together. So everyone does an Overwatch type audition, watch them all together, and you can kind of get a feel. I know the casters had to like share, so they didn't just send individual ones. They actually went to each other's houses and casted together. So I think that was also just to determine the pairings as well. And it was weird, but I mean, it didn't take a huge amount of time out of my day, and it was kind of fun to do as well in between the desk for WSG. So that worked out.
And you're living in Kiev, so going from South Africa to Kiev, those are incredibly different places. I should say Kiev, I should say Ukraine, comparing a whole country to a city. But what was the experience like of living away from home for such a long period of time?
The time wasn't so bad. It was a bit tough for me, but I think also, so I have my own place, so I have like my own responsibilities here, and I live with my significant other, so I moved out of home a long time ago, and I had a housemate years ago, but I've been on my own in my own place for a long time, so it's a bit strange having to go and then live with a bunch. Well, I mean, the first season I remember none of us knew each other, so we were living in these apartments together, and no one knew each other. So it was a little bit like being back in, like, I suppose, like a housing setup or residence at university or whatever else, digs for want of a better term. So that was a bit weird. And I'm also a little bit, one, being the only girl and also being considerably older than all the other guys, because I think all the other guys were like 22, 23, and I was 29, 30. So that was kind of like a little bit strange in the beginning, but within like a week we were all fine. And I think it's kind of sad now because we've all sort of moved on. I mean, Jaws, Leg Day, and Trid are still doing Contenders, and they're back in the Ukraine now, but obviously Des has moved on to focus on his startup, and I'm doing other stuff. And it's kind of weird because I spent a year with those guys. They turned into my brothers. And also because for all of us, it was, I mean, Kiev was completely different. I didn't really live in a city. I've always had a car and could go wherever I wanted and had lots of space. And the biggest thing for me that I did struggle with was sitting outside. So like I said to you earlier, I spend most of my time outside. I have a big balcony. The door's always open. I'm always in the sunshine. Going from that to like -10 in the snow, I'd never even seen proper snow before until I was there. That was a huge adjustment.
Wow. And so now you're moving on from Contenders. What's the plan? I know that you were doing Splatoon 2 recently.
So I did Splatoon 2, which I loved. I've loved that game since before it came out. I was obsessed with it, and I played it so much when it first came out. So that was really exciting. I did Splatoon last week, and I just had so much fun. But for the most part, and I think this is my biggest downfall, is that I don't really ever have a plan. So I mean, like I said to you, I fell into this whole thing just by chance. I didn't really have a plan at the beginning of the year. I kind of went, I want a bit of a break. So that happened for like 2 weeks. And then next thing I was doing work. But it's kind of like I never really plan stuff. And I know a lot of other people have plans. So they have a set, they go, this is where I want to be in a year. And this is what I need to do to get there. Which I suppose maybe if I did and my mom would say applied myself more, I could do that. But for the most part, I kind of just go along with the flow and see what happens. I definitely want to do more Overwatch because I really enjoyed it. And I kind of want to get into shoutcasting. I just don't know if I'm good enough yet.
But you get to practice, right? What kind of game would you like to cast for?
So I think I kind of like to shoutcast Overwatch, but I also feel like Leg Day and Jaws, I can't beat them ever. I'll never be as good as they are, so maybe not. But Overwatch I'm pretty keen on. CS, obviously, because that's always been my first love. So CSGO is something that I'd love to. And then I don't know about Battle Royale. I think if it was Apex and it did become an eSports, it would kind of suit me. But even Splatoon's quite fun. So I think anything FPS, definitely. But for focus, I'm kind of keen on the just going back to CSGO because it is my favorite. But I don't know yet. Like I've done a couple of casts. I actually did do one cast, which is so weird because I've just said FPS. And now I'm just going to... I did shoutcast a Clash Royale tournament in South Africa. So it was the Red Bull MEO qualifier, and the winner of that ended up going overseas to the finals. I actually shoutcasted that. But that was a mobile game, so I don't know if it counts. But it was so much fun.
That does count.
It was so much fun, and I really enjoyed it. And I really like desk hosting, and I've enjoyed desk hosting. I prefer it to interviews and stage hosting, and I think it's where I'm stronger. But I definitely think I could cast. I need to, my mom, I can always hear her in my head going, just apply yourself better. So maybe if I put some time in, I'll be shoutcasting soon.
I think that you can. And remember, you've got the whole Cold Red Discord to get some advice and find people you can bounce stuff off as well. That's a very valid point, and it's also I'm quite lucky because I do abuse everyone quite a bit in there with like sending them messages asking for suggestions and ideas. So I feel like I have some of the best shoutcasters in the world at my disposal to just like dump VODs on them and be like, please listen to this, and like bug them till they do. So I'm gonna abuse that a little bit in the next few months. I'm looking forward to seeing your progress, Sam. Is there anything else you'd like to say before I let you go and get back on it?
Frankie, I just want to say thank you so much. Like, I feel like we chatted a lot about me, and that you and I could chat a little bit more because you are honestly an inspiration. Like, I obviously know your story about when you left Twitch and how you sort of, I've read your blogs, I stalk you a little bit online, and I consider us like, we know each other quite well. I'm just so inspired by like where you were and to where you got and the work that you put in. And I don't think people give you enough credit. Like, I see a lot of people be like, oh, Frankie's really good, but I don't think they give you credit for how good you've got in such a short space of time and how easy it is for you to flex onto stuff. So, like, you're my hero for 2019.
Oh,
it's my fangirl moment. Yay!
Oh, thank you so much, Sam. It's been brilliant watching you rock it, especially on that Overwatch desk as well. So thank you. That's so kind. And I hope maybe you'll be casting an event that I'm hosting soon.
I think we just need to make it happen. I'm going to start like a hashtag, get Frankie and Sam to the same event.
Yes.
And then I'll just spam it till someone pays attention. That's the plan.
I love that. That we should plan that, and we'll celebrate by coming on stage in an egg, Red Eyes hosting,
yes!
And then we just break the egg and surprise Paul.
I'm going to go find you an egg. That's my goal for today.
Yes. Okay, brilliant. Good. Egg Fest. It's going to happen. Not sure when, but we're going to make it work. If anyone would like to help me and Sam make Egg Fest work, then please do give us a message. I am at GetFrank on Twitter. Let's make this happen. In all seriousness, thank you so much to Sam. I was really excited to hear more about the scene in South Africa, and now I'm more desperate than ever to go and visit because I haven't been there in such a long time, and it was the holiday of a lifetime when I went. However, my lifetime wasn't very long at the time. I was only 9, so I'm really excited about getting to go back there one day. Now, if you would like to keep up with the podcast, make sure you do subscribe. I'm all around the world at the moment. I'm trying to think when this comes out, because I'm actually recording this a little bit in advance because I've got so many trips planned at the moment. But, you know, you can keep up to date with me on Twitter, on the socials, etc., etc. If you are one of the people who follows me on Twitch as well, I'm so sorry that I haven't done streams recently. It's just been a bit hard to kind of get them off the ground because of hotel rooms and terrible Wi-Fi, but hopefully I'm going to have a bit of time off soon so I can actually do a little bit of streaming and have a bit of R&R, because right now, even though I don't sound it, I am absolutely exhausted. So I want to work as much as I can, but I also realise I sometimes need to have a break, and I'm not very good at doing that. Anyway, enough about me. Thank you so much for listening as always, and I can't wait to get the next episode out. I haven't arranged who it's going to be with yet, so I'm going to have to take my microphone with me on some of these trips. But it might be that there's a little bit of a break after this episode just because of being away and not actually having time to record and edit. But if you subscribe to the podcast, you will get the episode as soon as it's available. So if you're interested, please do that. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, thank you and goodbye.